Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have two very special guests. They come to us from Europe. Their names are Marja West and Jurgen Snoeren. And they just published a book, July 17th, 2021. Title of the book is Lost in the Jungle, The Mysterious Disappearance of Two Dutch Girls in the Panamanian Jungle. And the names of the girls were Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. And I remember the story back in 2014. It was all over the news here in the States, but obviously from where they're from, but in the Netherlands, it was big news when they disappeared in Panama. And this book really brought a lot of the facts and information easily accessible. Really a great book, really great true crime book. And I'm delighted to have them here. So Marja and Jurgen, are you there?
Yes, we're both here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. Can you guys talk about the background of this case and what got you interested in the subject of these two girls who disappeared in the Panamanian jungle?
Shall I start, Jurgen? Because we're on different locations.
Right.
I guess back in 2016, the Daily Beast had an article about this case, and it struck both of us that these two girls were in the jungle for days and days and days after the disappearance. We're both also fictional writers, fiction writers. So we couldn't imagine how one would feel when you're 21, 22, and you're there in this cold, dark jungle. It's 12 degrees Celsius at the most in the middle of the night. So that's sort of stick to us, the whole idea. We never did anything with it. And then 3 years later, the Daily Beast came with another article, and based on the same facts as the article 3 years earlier, they now said that they weren't lost, but there was a crime involved. And this, I think, was the starting point for us, wasn't it, Jurgen?
Yeah, the first thing was that very dramatic image of two girls sort of dying in the jungle while very close by sort of the search parties were going. And I remember talking about it on the phone with Marja, saying that would be a great angle for a book. Just at that one moment that they probably would have heard search parties going by and not able to reach them.
Right. And can you talk about the background of the case, who the two girls were, where they were from, how they made it to Panama? It was kind of in a rural part of Panama, is my understanding. But can you give the audience some background about the case? One of you?
Yes. Both girls lived in the Netherlands in a city called Amersfoort. And they had a 3 year. The study, they just were finished their first study, were going ahead with the second one, and they decided to go to Panama for 6 weeks, 2 weeks on holidays, and 4 weeks doing voluntary work in some childcare organization, or with some childcare organization. And their first idea wasn't Panama. They were first planning to go to Costa Rica. But something went wrong with all the bookings, and there wasn't any voluntary work available there. So they decided to go to Panama. And I remember the father of Lisanne Froon, this is how you pronounce her name, saying on television that he was first delighted that his child wouldn't go to Costa Rica because he was very afraid. And then a couple of weeks later, she said, "Well, Dad, we go to America, but now it's Panama." And this for him was devastating. And so these girls went to Panama. They first went to Bocas del Toro, which is a sort of island group at the northern part of Panama, near Costa Rica. It's Party Island there. It's Bounty Island. It's all palm trees and parties. They had a great time for over 2 weeks. And then they went to Boquete. And Boquete is a really small town, rural town, somewhere near the jungle. It's not in the jungle, it's near the jungle. Straight behind Boquete is a very great national park, and this is completely jungle. And so they were there just 4 weeks to do voluntary work, and now I'll leave it to Jurgen.
Yeah, they went to do voluntary work, but after a few days they heard that the school they were supposed to work at didn't have any room for them. And so they had to wait another week while the organization was trying to hustle up a new position for them. So they had a week to kill, and they decided to fill that time with the stuff you do in that village, which is walking mainly. You can raft there. There's a lot of nature, and one day they decided to go for a walk, to take a hike, and then they disappeared.
And that was it. That was on, like, I think it was March 30th or April 1st. They disappeared from Boquete, which is kind of a rural part, I would say northwestern Panama, closer to the Costa Rican border. And sorry.
Yeah, it's basically right in the middle, close to the Costa Rican border. It's between the two, right in the middle of the two coastal regions, between Bocas del Toro, which is a big city, and David, which is a big city. And basically, it's quite literally in the middle of nowhere.
Right. So it's kind of rural. It's known for backpackers. It has a small expat community from all over the world. So they disappear. What happens next?
They the voluntary work. I start a little bit close. They came to Boquete in 29 of March, I think. March 29. And this was on a weekend. They first had a weekend off, and then they would start this voluntary work on Monday. But something went wrong again, booking this voluntary work. That wasn't their fault. It wasn't their. Just something went wrong, and so that Monday they heard that there weren't. They couldn't start. They wouldn't start for over a week. So they had time off, and they didn't know what to do. And both girls, Bocas del Toro was party. Boquete, that's really outdoor. That's a completely different world. So both girls were settling in, and they said, okay, you know what? We make it a great week anyway. So let's seek some things to do, like walking, hiking, some excursions and stuff like that. And on April 1st, they decided to walk this Pianista Trail, which is it's a nice trail. It's you go up to a certain point and you turn around. So they went up this trail. They went up to this point. We call it the Mirador in the book because it hasn't got a name, and we need to give the name anyway. So they went up to this point, and especially that day, it was very nice weather. It was the start of the raining season, but that day it was completely dry in Panama.
Right, and they were left very early, right? Kind of 11 o'clock in the morning, is that correct? Or is that what?
Yeah, around 11 o'clock. They left around 11 o'clock in the morning. A bit before, I think it was 11:15. They left, and the last, how you call it, GSM pole that picked up their signal was 11:04, and this was near the place where the hike starts.
Right, so there was they just kind of disappeared. People assumed they went for a hike, and that created kind of like within a day, nobody knew where they were, right? So they pretty much disappeared, and some people suspected foul play, right?
Yeah, basically people suspected they gone to the Pianista Trail because they had talked about it. Fact is, they didn't tell anybody what they're planning to do that morning, and we figured that going to the Pianista was sort of a last-minute decision. While having breakfast, what are we going to do today? Well, we could go to the Pianista. There was a waiter, supposedly saw them, talked to them that same morning, and they told him we are going for a hike. So very much a spontaneous thing, which meant that for the first few days, the search parties went all over the place because they weren't exactly sure where they went.
And how did their disappearance play out back in the Netherlands?
I think it was in the news in the Netherlands by April the 3rd or 4th, I guess it was. People, especially people over a certain age, over 21, they are allowed to be missing for 48 hours before police are doing anything. That's here in the Netherlands, the same thing. It's in Panama. I guess it's in the USA as well. But I think we heard about 4 April, the news came on that 2 girls were missing in Panama. And of course, I think at that very first beginning, everybody thought, well, they're going to be found. It's okay. It's a big jungle, but there were a lot of search parties there. There was a lot of everything. Everyone was looking for those two girls. So I guess in the beginning, everybody really thought that they would be found somewhere, maybe in a couple of days, dried or not, or hungry or sick. But anyway, they would be found.
Right. So they really kind of just disappeared. And I remember the story here in the U.S., at least the stories that I read right around that time, 2014, was suspected that, there was foul play or something was going on. So people were looking for suspicious characters in that area of Boquete and so how did this search develop after kind of the first couple days?
Well, they basically searched everything. They did search a lot of areas around the Pianista, but also the more popular tourist hotspots, just to exclude, the possibility that they'd been there. But they basically searched the Pianista Trail from the start right up to the coast in Bocas del Toro. They searched Bocas del Toro, every address that they've been, that they were, and found nothing, not a sign, no discarded clothing. Very conflicting witness statements. So basically, after a few weeks, they were at a loss.
Right. So they just pretty much disappeared, and then certain items and things started to be found. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that took 2 months. They those first days. I remember that at April the 4th, when the search parties would really go off, there was this big storm in the area, so search parties stopped again, and it wasn't until April the 6th when all this searching would really start. It took 2 months. The 2 months time, nothing was found, not a clue, nothing. And in 2 months later, it was 11th of June, this indigenous woman named Irma, she was at a river. It's called the Shanguinola. It's a very, very great big river there. She was at the river near some rice fields, and these rice fields, they're really in the middle of the jungle. Nobody's living there. If you're, it needs a 4-hour walk for us Europeans to go there from this indigenous town until before you are at the rice fields. So this was in the middle of nowhere, and she saw Lisanne's backpack. At least she saw a backpack. She didn't know it was Lisanne's, but she heard about the Dutch woman missing. Of course, she saw the search parties in her in the area where she lived, and so she took the backpack and she brought it to her husband, who was also nearby. But it was 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 6:30, sun goes down in that area. So they decided to stay the night at the rice field. They would stay anyway, but they decided to stay with the backpack, and they went back to the village the next day.
Right. So they have this backpack, and what's in the backpack?
Well, they just opened it at the village, and this at this point they knew it was Lisanne Froon's backpack, because there was this little not a social security card. It was how you say this, healthcare card in it, and it says her name. There were 2 bras found in the backpack. They're both their mobile phones were there. There was a camera there. There was money there, quite a bits of money for those people. It was about $86 and something. And but these were the main things found in the backpack, and they were all so.
And it kind of increased the mystery, because it was very far away from where people expected, if they were in the back, to be found. But also people went through the photos, and there were some suspicions about the photos and curiosities about the photos, right?
Yeah, the mystery was all about the nighttime pictures, as they were called, which were about 100 pretty much dark pictures, and only later, when they were enhanced, could you see that they weren't black, in fact, but they were taken somewhere deep in the jungle in the middle of the night. You could see some trees, some rocks, and those were taken April 8th, in the morning of April 8th, while the last daytime photo found on the camera was on the April the 1st. So people immediately started wondering what happened in the meantime. Why didn't they take any pictures between the 1st and the 8th? So conclusions about this has to be some kind of a crime, were pretty much instantaneous.
Right, like they were abducted, like this strange event. And also at the same time, there's this kind of internet crime sleuths, web sleuths, and you had a couple kind of independent researchers in Germany and the Netherlands. Also, kind of these photographs got leaked, right? So people were analyzing this online. Is that correct?
Yes, they're not all leaked. Some of them are leaked, and but you're right. Everybody was analyzing those pictures, seeing everything in it and nothing at the same time. And those pictures are haunting because they're not all pitch black. Some of them you see like a little string of hair. Some is one picture you see hair and it looks like red hair. So Kris was a red hair. And there are also some pictures. One picture with a branch on a rock, and there are two red things tied to it. And there was another picture which was analyzed by the Daily Beast, and they said there was toilet paper on it, and some other stuff like the like a Pringle bus. If you tear down a Pringle bus, you got this little, this round thing you leave with this little round thing, and this is
right.
Yeah, so there were a lot of strange pictures as well made that nighttime. But you know what? It's really dark there. It's not like everywhere else. There's no light. There's no houses. There's no plants. There's nothing. So it was really dark, pitch dark there.
Right. So it just increased the mystery. Like you're right. The haunting is really the right term because it's very creepy. And I think it just created this whole other thing that there's rumors of people of a low character that might have abducted them or done horrible things, right?
Yeah, we sort of traced the beginning of those murder abduction rumors to the photo of Kris's hair that was shown on a Dutch television show in the early phases of the research. But part of the photo that they showed was covered up. And somebody online just said they covered it up because there was blood there and the family didn't want to have it shown on TV, which was a rumor that Jeremy Crit in his television articles later echoed. So this whole thing about there's a photo in there which shows Kris with blood in her hair became sort of the basis for all those conspiracy theories. Right. Of course, when we later saw the originals, there was no blood to be seen anywhere.
And so Jeremy Crit was the one who wrote the two articles, the one who said they were missing and then one that there was foul play, Daily Beast. And so how did the story unfold from there?
Well, the story in the Netherlands sort of didn't unfold. It unfolded in the web sleuth community, but not in the newspapers. Those girls were found. There were a couple of search parties initially from the Netherlands with dogs and on. And in the end, also the parents said, okay, girls were lost. But still, one of the parents wasn't very sure. And I can imagine that. I mean, if you lose your 21-year-old daughter in such circumstances, and yet there's nothing you gain back for her, there's nothing, there's not you can't close this. I guess I would have thought also, what happened, where's my child? And I couldn't believe also that they were simply lost. Right. So it sort of developed in the web sleuth community. And there were some really, really strange things going on. We spoke to people also here in the Netherlands. One guy who said, my father is involved, a Dutch guy living in Boquete. And he had a great story. He had a story about this, telling us his father had done it. But still, they couldn't find anything there. Police was in his house. They couldn't find anything there.
Right, and even there were issues and complaints about police activities, like they didn't secure their room. There were fingerprints on the backpack. There were some issues about police procedure, correct?
Yeah, there was the that's the usual complaint about in these conspiracy theories, of course, that it's the fault of the police. It's true that if you look at the investigation in detail, then it isn't the most comprehensive research they could have done. On the other hand, backpackers routinely disappear for a few days and turn up again. So in those first few days after the disappearance, they sort of treated it like a disappearance, not like a crime, which meant that the crime scene wasn't secured until a few days later, when they decided that this wasn't just a routine disappearance of a few backpackers going partying.
Right. So all of their stuff, both Lisanne and Kris's, all their belongings, passports, were back where they were staying. Right. So it's almost like they weren't expected, like they were leaving the country or something, right?
No, nothing. It was all there. The beds were unmade. All their clothes were there. The shoes, all their makeup, everything was there. And also their telephones were only 50% battery, so they didn't even load their telephones. Everything showed that they were just going for a hike and nothing more.
Right. So then what happens next? I mean, there's dogs that are brought out, right? So the parents are bringing, I think, private investigators, if I remember correctly. How does the story develop kind of after kind of the early April times?
After I think it was the April 14th, the official search was concluded and things were turned over to the police, so it became a police investigation, and they kept on searching with the police, supported by the border patrol, the sea patrol, the air patrol. I mean, they really tried their best, I have to say, but after a while they didn't find anything, so all the searches petered out until in August in June they started finding the first remains. That triggered another bout of searches, and then the parents came in again because they felt that not enough was being done. So they brought in dog teams from the Netherlands to help them search for a second time. But apart from the backpack and a few bone remains, nothing was found after that. So about January 2014, 2015, the case was basically closed, and the parents had to admit that there wasn't much to do anymore.
Can you explain what remains were found, how they were found, and what remains were not found, right? So there was some things that should have been found.
Well, what was found beside of the rocks, but what was found is the foot of Lisanne, and in it there was the shoe of Lisanne, and in it her foot. Later on, parts of her legs were found, and then eventually her whole leg was found, but in parts. And what was found from Kris was half of her pelvis and a small piece of rib, and that was all.
Right, so it wasn't very much at all. People said they should have found skulls or large parts of their rib cage. So that's even more mysterious. And it makes more speculation when they said that I think it was Kris's pelvis had been treated with some type of caustic substance, right?
Yeah, some kind of bleach. Yeah.
And so people it's even greater mystery of what's going on. I mean, would you say that at that time in 2014 that the majority of people thought that there was foul play, or was it just an accident? How would you describe it?
I think after the remains in the back, after the backpack was found, especially after the photos leaked out, I think that pretty much 90% of the people, except maybe the police in Boketi and the Dutch police, thought it was a homicide. Although most of the facts that they came up with were actually not true, and either invented or just false theories, like the whole thing with the bleach on Kris's pelvis, which was a rumor based on a faulty reading of parts of the autopsy report, which stated as a possibility of the because the pelvis was a bit wider than you should have expected. One of the possibility could have been bleach or sunshine. So people turned that into, so bleach was used, so phosphates were discovered, which wasn't true at all. And the other thing about finding the bones, people made a lot of fuss about so little of the bones being found. But if you ever seen the river at full swing in the middle of the rain season, then it's a bloody miracle that any bones were found at all. Because if you fall in the river when it's the rain season, you grind it to pieces.
Right. And it's like that anywhere. And that area was full of small streams and flash floods and things like that, right?
Yeah, and rocks and waterfalls and whatnot. So they found a few remains sort of by chance on the edge of the river. And, if they had, it was purely by chance. I mean, one of the forensic pathologists we spoke to said it's a bloody miracle they found anything at all.
Right. And do you think that kind of like the internet sleuths or the web sleuths, do you think that they kind of impeded the investigation by all of their hypothesizing, like there was a photo missing, photo 050 was missing or something, and misinterpreting information? Would you think that added to kind of the hysteria? I kind of got that impression.
Well, what it adds is that this was very, very painful for the parents and for the friends of those girls, because these things were going around on the internet. But not only that, parents from the girls, friends of the girls, police, they all received emails from people saying, I knew who did it, I knew what happened, this is what's going on, you've been lied to, this is not true, that's not true. So it was very painful for a lot of people. But I guess that now knowing Betsaida Pitti, she kept straight. She kept her back straight, and she just did her thing. And of course, she knew what was going on. She knew what was said, and she knew that there were also in Boquete a lot of private investigators, making their own. How you say this? Making their own stuff and doing their own research, but still, she kept her back straight, and she just did what she needed to do.
Right, and so she's also credited in this book, right? Betsaida Pitti Sarud, and but there were just so many. Like there was a guy who said he knew who did it and kind of intimidated people, and this is a secret. So there was just so much kind of over dramatic things taking place, and I think that actually happens in a lot of true crime stories or a lot of mysteries where meddlers kind of stir up things and create a bunch of drama that doesn't need to be there. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, what it certainly did was it added extra pressure on Betsaida Pitti, because for an area which relies on tourism rather heavily, and in a country that was trying to rebuild itself for the last 20-30 years, it caused a sort of an unwelcome media storm that was kept alive by all the internet attention.
Right.
Other than that, there were a lot of people in the Boquete area falsely accused, like you see in all these internet cases, which only added to the unrest and, let's say, the unwillingness of people to cooperate with the official searches. So in that sense, it did impede the investigation, because we heard later from people over there, after the remains were found and the whole public opinion swung towards murder and all kinds of local people were implicated, everybody basically shut up.
Right. So I mean, there was this real thing. And how was the backpack explained to be where it was found? What didn't they find also that the cell phones had been pinging cell towers? I guess that's two questions.
The backpack, there's an explanation for the backpack to be found there, because the place or the spot where it was found is obviously not the spot where the girls ended up. There were flash floods. There was heavy rain on the June 11th, the day it was found. And there were flash floods. And so our guess is that it was on one of the rocks near the banks of the river. and just washed away by the river and ended up. This was in the summer. The river would bend there a little bit, and it ended up in this corner where this big rock is there, and it stayed there. And I guess if Irma wouldn't have been there that particular day, it wouldn't have been found at all. Next flash floods, it would have gone further, and who says where it would end up?
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't such an illogical place at all if you know the area a bit, because it was downstream from, let's say, the Mirador, the peak where they ended their hike. So if you fall in one of the rivers on that hike after you start descending from the Mirador, then you automatically end up somewhere downstream in the area where the backpack was found. So I know a lot of people online made a big thing about the place where the backpack was found sort of proved that foul play was involved and somebody placed the backpack over there, but throw something in a river in that area and it automatically ends up there.
Right. And I've worked in the Sierra Nevadas, and when people get lost in the rushing rivers right there at the beginning of winter, they're not found till spring. So like you just don't find them until later. They're really not. If they get thrown in some of these rushing rivers, there's a lot of movement. They're usually found miles downstream too. So there's a lot there. Tell me about the cell phones though. I mean, one of the other haunting elements of this case is somebody's trying to make calls, right?
Yeah, they tried to call. The last picture taken on that April 1st was at a couple of minutes before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And next thing, 2 hours and 3/4 of an hour later, the Dutch emergency number is called by Kremers. And I think 9 minutes later, again by Lisanne and Froon. They both didn't have any connection. And there's no cell phone connection there in the jungle. There's just little tiny spots up on a mountain where the indigenous village is, and there you have connection, but that's the only spot. There's nothing there. So, and the next morning, around 8, the call started again to the emergency number, first in Dutch, but on day 3, they start to phone the Panamanian emergency number, which is a different number. It's 911. Total, they call 7 times, and then it stops at all.
Right. So, I mean, it just adds to the mystery. And then this is interpreted as all foul play, right? So they're abducted, trying to get out or something like that. So that's the whole kind of the crux of this whole case is how people are interpreting the evidence as it flows in, right?
Yeah, we reconstruct the whole timeline in the book, weighing all the different theories that are about. The thing is, the moment when the first 911 call starts, or 112 in this case, they're basically in the middle of nowhere. If you track their progress and where they could have been at that time, they're somewhere about an hour and a half from the river. So it's speculation time. What happened? What caused them to call 911 a few times, and then, which is the most mysterious thing of all, they both shut off their phone at the same time before dark, and then they started again the next morning. So some say you can only explain it because they were attacked or chased, and then called 911 because they were attacked. While of course there are plenty of reasons why they could have made those calls.
Right, and you have tons of pictures and graphs and maps in the book, so you've really done your homework on this whole case. We're at about 35 minutes. How do you guys want to kind of wrap up? Each one of you want to kind of be a concluding statement, and then can you explain where the best place is to get the book Lost in the Jungle?
Yeah, well, for me, this whole it took us 20 months, this whole search, and we both started with an open vision. We never said, okay, it's this or that. We just said, well, let's see what it is. And at one point, we said, okay, unless we get the police files, we don't know nothing at all. We know nothing more than any web sleuths or anyone. It's just so when I spoke to Betsaida, she within 5 minutes she said you can have all the police files, and this was an eye opener for us. Jurgen translated all the files from Spanish to Dutch, which was a it was a very, very, very hard job. And I started writing the first chapters of this book. I'm glad we did this because, in my opinion, it was worth all the effort. It was worth the 20 months of search. It was worth all the web sleuths who fell over us, who also sent emails to us, to me at least. I was the one receiving all the emails. But it was worth it, and I'm glad that we that there's some sort of closure we could have given
the family. And Jurgen, what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, the thing is, there's a lot of misinformation floating around about this case. There are a lot of wrong and a lot of very hurtful theories about implicating family, implicating people in Bokati. And the thing we did is, I think we wrote the first comprehensive overview, objective overview of all the facts, supported by the official police files, so we could eliminate most of the nonsense floating around and arrive at some sort of objective conclusion of what happened, which is, I think, the closest anybody is ever going to get.
This case, great. And again, your website is www.lostinthejungle-thebook.com, correct?
Yes.
And so people can see there. And are you able to be contacted through that website?
Yes, there's an email address somewhere on the website. Yes, we can be contacted there.
Oh, you can be contacted there. Again, it's www.lostinthejungle-thebook.com. I'll put that in the show notes. And really fascinating book, really supremely, really well researched, all the information on there. Highly recommend people check this out. Again, the full title is Lost in the Jungle, The Mysterious Disappearance of Two Dutch Girls in the Panamanian Jungle, published July 7th, 2021 by Marja, West, and Jurgen Snoeren. Jurgen and Marja, thank you so much.
Yes, it's available on Amazon. And
on Amazon too. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Okay, stay there.